Morning, it's Kevin Kenny. We are live in New York City on the Build series, and our guest today has been named by Rolling Stone magazine as a 10 of the top country artists you need to know this year. Her new EP, Chasin Me, hits, hits stores. Hits streaming services probably everywhere next Friday. Please give it up for Caroline Jones. Welcome back to Build. I was just saying, you were here, last summer?
Last summer, yes.
That's cool. And then this is kind of like a homecoming of sorts for you as far as press stops go, because you went to NYU, you told me.
Yep, we were just talking about that. Yeah, this is my old stomping ground.
That's wild.
Yeah.
What do you remember about were you playing music back then or no?
Absolutely, yeah. I was actually kind of a one-stop shop back then. I was writing and producing and recording and performing and booking myself. Like, I was completely independent. I didn't even have a manager. And so I was touring all the kind of bars in the city and then touring schools, high schools and colleges around New England.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Did you ever do like the bitter end?
Oh, yeah.
The circuit?
Yeah, the whole circuit, yeah.
How great of an education must that have been, though? Just in terms of, I know so many artists that they feel a bit naive maybe entering the business, but having your hands in booking and then the instrumentation, did you feel like you were really well prepared?
I feel like I'm always learning.
Yeah.
I feel like I'll spend my entire life working on all the aspects of my craft, from the business and entrepreneurial side to the instrumental and musical side, which are both endless endeavors of creativity and learning. But I think for sure, being an independent artist early on, making that conscious choice to be an independent artist in New York, booking myself in bars. I mean, there really is no education like that. It's not necessarily like the most pleasurable gigs, but it's a good education for sure. And also, you kind of learn the artist that you want to be, and you learn that if you want to be a singer-songwriter, then there are other, now there's so many different avenues for whatever kind of artist you want to be. So that was a great education, yeah.
Totally. Do you almost find that, because we'll get into your touring resume, which is incredible, but you've done some massive shows. Do you find those old bar gigs were actually harder than maybe a bigger, amphitheater or stadium?
In a way, yes. I think the biggest education for me and the hardest thing for me was I used to think it was my job. Like, I kind of had a chip on my shoulder, and you feel like as a performer, as a young performer, you kind of have this ambition of like, I have to make everyone shut up and listen and like me, And then eventually, after playing bars, you realize that people don't go to a bar to shut up and listen. Like, they go to a bar to drink and talk. So then you learn how to actually add to the ambience and the energy of whatever's going on. So that was a great education for me, because as a touring artist and then doing press and doing all kinds of gigs, like, you learn that every situation is different, and different people, like you all, are sitting here and listening, but sometimes we're in a different environment, and you have to learn as a performer and artist how to add to the energy of wherever you are and bring your authentic heart to it in the way that you can, but also to be in the moment of whatever's going on, so you're not too hard on yourself that it has to be like this or it has to be like that.
And I think that's the greatest challenge, right, as an artist, being in the moment, right? Yeah. Getting out of your own head and just letting sort of the art, the music speak for itself. And
yeah, and it comes with experience. Like, it's one of those things that you can only, you can only really learn by experience, by having shows that are great and then shows that are not so great, and realizing that it's all part of the journey and the process.
Totally. You said earlier that you love always learning, and you are always learning. What is sort of fascinating to you right now at this point in your journey?
Oh, that's such a good question. So much. Something that fascinates me is the blurring of gender lines and the blurring of genre lines that we're experiencing in music and in art. And I would just say, like, especially in country, all the influences that are coming in to country with pop and with hip-hop and with electronic music. And it's just a really interesting time for artists, because in country, which is a pretty traditional genre, like, we're starting to experience a lot more of that. And then so you kind of figure out where you want to fit in. I grew up in a generation where we listened to everything, and the music industry doesn't really yet reflect all of those developments, that art is now forcing upon it, and that the digital age is now forcing upon it. So it's a really interesting time, and art is kind of leading the way in that sense.
Yeah. I love everything you just said. Country is so fascinating of a term, and we're lucky enough to have so many great country acts stop by, quote unquote, like you're saying, genres, whatever these days, with country acts. What is country to you? And I'm not looking for the authority, no pressure. This isn't like the be all end all, but to you personally, when you hear country, what does that mean?
Well, I discovered country pretty late in life. I grew up in the Northeast, so I didn't grow up listening to country. I discovered it when I first went to Nashville when I was 17, and I went to a show at the Bluebird Cafe, which is like a legendary singer-songwriter venue. And for me, what struck me about country was the focus on the authenticity and the storytelling of the songwriting. I just was completely hooked by these songwriters who were sharing their words and melody and capturing hearts and minds with just their guitar and just their voice, and then telling the stories behind the songs. Because I was fascinated by the creative process. Like I always have been, that kind of like VH1 storytellers behind the music thing. Like I just eat that up. And so country, that's really the focus. Like it's really the genre where that authenticity and those storytellers, that's still the basis of the genre, like, and the emphasis on musicianship, and that's really important to me. That's what I want to be known for. So for me, that's what I feel like is the Venn diagram of like my brand of music,
Right.
and then country is like the focus on authenticity and the real, like, true passion and love for the craft of musicianship and production and songwriting.
Did you ever listen to hip hop growing up? Because I think the reason I'm asking you is because I like country for the same reasons you just said, and that's also why I like hip hop. And now hip hop is getting now, you know, maybe newer artists aren't championing lyricism like they used to necessarily in that genre, but that's what the storytellers is what gravitated me towards both of those genres.
Yeah,
I
mean, it's so interesting because hip hop bled into pop music like very early on in like the 2000s, and now it like is pop music,
Totally.
you know? So, but I didn't really listen to hip hop, like purist hip hop, like what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But I feel what fascinates me and what I love about hip hop is like the phrasing and the sense of rhythm and the sense of syncopation, which I feel like has bled into so many different types of music now, including country, which is amazing. And actually, I've just gotten a little bit into Chance the Rapper, who's like incredible at that, and just has such a fascinating sense of rhythm. And syncopation, and that really excites me, especially in production. Like you have producers like Zed who really play with that, like syncopation, and that is one of my favorite parts of production is like finding different melodies and different instrumental patterns that play off each other in a rhythmic way, and that's very hip hop.
You must love the New York Times video series. I don't know if you've ever seen the
with John Harmonica. Is
so
that
cool?
Yeah, it's so good.
It's awesome. You nerd out on that.
Yeah.
I want to get into your touring resume really quick because this is really wild. Zac Brown Band, I think for 3 years now. You're going to be doing dates with Trisha Yearwood this fall. You've been on the road with Kenny Chesney, Tim McGraw, Faith Hill. The list goes on and on. Jimmy Buffett, of course. I think from the outside, maybe for a casual fan, they think every country show is a country show. Do you find different flavors when you go on the road with different people?
Absolutely, and especially a lot of the artists that I've had the privilege of touring with have their own kind of lifestyle brand associated with it, like Jimmy or Zach, or even Kenny. Like they have their own particular brand that's beyond music. It comes out of the music, but it's really like their values and their personality and the things that are meaningful and important to them that they've kind of built this whole culture around, like the Parrot Heads, you know, or the Zamily or the No Shoes Nation. Like there's emotions that are associated with their music for the fans. And like Kenny's tour next year is called Chillaxification. Like, but that really is an emotional word. Like people will save up all their money and go, and they feel those feelings of freedom and letting go and coming together. And it sounds cheesy, but it's like a whole peace love thing. And it really is
community.
Powerful. Yeah, it's very, very powerful. So especially being able to open for artists who really have that deep relationship and connection with their fan bases is something I've learned a lot from.
Yeah.
Because what they stand for is just as important as the music. It is the music.
Oh, absolutely. And, mentor is a term that gets thrown around a lot in music. I'm just curious, that those are terms that have been associated with you and Zach and Jimmy. What do those two people mean to you as an artist and just growth?
Well, Zach was the first person to ever take me on tour, take me under his wing. He was the first person to really go out on a limb and give me a huge opportunity. He invited me to open 2 shows for him, and then I ended up staying for the whole tour, and just took me under his wing and mentored me just mostly by leading by example and taking an interest in my music and inviting me on stage to sing with him and the band. And I just really, you know, being around a big tour like that, a big amphitheater tour where there's hundreds of people, but it's the same crew every day, different place every day. It's really like summer camp, and you really, you know, it's the most fun ever. Like, it was a total dream come true for me that first tour. I just couldn't get over it. Like, I thought all my Christmases had come at once. And so you get to know all these people, and they're all a family, you know, and they're all an integral part of putting on this event that happens every night that inspires and uplifts, like we were just talking about, like millions of people over the course of the year. And so it's an amazing thing to witness, like someone like Zac, who's at the top of that, leading by example and setting the tone and the energy for everyone else who, like I said, there is no job that's unimportant on a big tour. And then Jimmy, I mean, he took me on tour, and then not only that, but gave me a distribution deal for my album that I made, and wrote a song for me called Gulf Coast Girl, which is on this EP.
It's on this EP,
yeah.
right?
And has just gone out of his way so many times to just be supportive of me and collaborate with me and give me a platform for his fans. And I owe Zac and Jimmy basically the career that I have so far.
How'd you meet Jimmy?
Through Zac.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
cool.
So Jimmy's manager came to one of the Zac shows, and I'd known him a little bit. Also, Mac McAnally, who's Jimmy's right-hand man musically, and in the Coral Reefer Band, and an incredible 10-time CMA Musician of the Year.
Also wrote
producer.
Gulf Coast Girl,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
He and Jimmy wrote Gulf Coast Girl, but Mac was one of the first people to introduce me to the studio scene in Nashville.
Oh, cool.
So I'd known him for years, but I met Jimmy when he asked me to do open the hurricane relief benefit in Tallahassee in 2017 after all those hurricanes. And we just hit it off from there.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
The with the exception of Gulf Coast Girl, and then Zac also helped with a song. What song did Zac help on the EP?
Yeah, so All of the Boys, which is a really fun song on the EP. I'm really excited for people to hear it. We've been playing it live. It's kind of like a pop rock song, and it's super sassy and fun, and he helped out on that co-writing, so that was fun. I've never really co-written, so that was kind of I wrote that song, and then I brought it to Zac, and he made a few tweaks, and because I thought it would be up his alley. So
Totally.
yeah.
Well, it's cool because you talk about not really co-writing a ton.
Yeah.
Those are the only two songs on the EP that you did have collaborations with.
Right.
Everything else is totally self-written.
Yes.
So how important is creative control for you when you're putting out music, putting out projects?
It's been paramount. I mean, I think now I'm opening up more. I think in the beginning it was absolutely paramount, because to develop a sense of like artistic identity and a sense of self is really difficult if you're just thrown into collaboration immediately without really taking the time, at least for me, this was my experience, without really taking the time and putting in the hours to know what you want to say and who you are and what do you write when you're left to your own devices. And I just always had a really, really strong vision for myself and what I wanted to say and how I wanted it to sound. And I had all these ideas, and I didn't always trust people to not dilute them, if that makes sense. And there is a little bit of control issues there that, like, I'm sure I'll grow out of.
But I think all great artists have that, I should say.
I maybe have too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think I'm growing out of it a little bit, but I just love my craft, and I feel like, I don't know, I feel like if you're born with a vision and with ideas for the kind of art that you want to make, that it's your job to bring that to fruition. And I was always really careful of not letting outside opinions deter me from what I felt like was in my heart and in my soul. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for collaboration. I wouldn't be able to do this without an incredible team of people who I've really learned to trust and come to value their opinions so much. But again, it's about developing that trust because they understand they understand my vision, like they understand the end goal. So they can lend their talents and contribute.
Well, and I think if you do have that control and, a control freak early on in your career, you can get to know yourself, establish yourself, and then you open yourself up to the trust that you now have to collaborate, right?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think that'll be a next chapter for me.
Yeah, that's exciting. Tough Guys is also on the EP. Are we getting a new version of Tough Guys? It's like a re-recording?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what happened was Tough Guys was my first single from Bare Feet, which came out, Tough Guys, I think came out 3 years ago, this month. And And the thing is that we started touring and we started just extending and extending Tough Guys because people just love that song and we always close with it and it's just such a rocker. And so we extended it and we have all these, like with my band, we have all these little solos. Like we have bass solos, which is so fun because bass never has a solo. And we have cool guitar solo and I have a whole harmonica breakdown, harmonica solo. And
That's
like
awesome.
people just love the harmonica. So, and then we kind of developed it live. It became even more rock and even more raw. And so we wanted to re-record the live version that we do. So we re-recorded it and we put it out because I played Tough Guys on Jimmy Fallon when I did Jimmy Fallon 2 months ago. I forget.
Yeah, it's a blur.
But we did that version on Jimmy Fallon. So we put it out and put it on the EP.
How was Fallon? Because I always like to ask artists because it's a unique experience for everybody, and it's always such a different experience than it looks like on TV. You know, there's a lot of waiting around. It's kind of a tough gig sometimes.
The whole day, yeah. Well, it was obviously incredible. It was a huge opportunity for me and my band and my team. Like, it was just such a family affair, you know, because we're like a startup. You know, I'm an independent artist, and me and my partner kind of run everything. So our whole team is like our family, and everybody's so important. So it's like a win. You know, it's like a really exciting. Those kind of milestones are really exciting for us. But I have to say, like, the Tonight Show, their crew, I mean, they obviously do it every day, but they're just probably the most professional, like, easygoing, nice people we've ever, and great sound, and obviously they're pros, so it was great.
Looks beautiful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. You're doing something really cool with pre-orders with this EP. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So my EP comes out 1 week from today. It's called Chasin Me. And for the pre-orders, my tour manager recently just lost his home down in the Bahamas in Hurricane Dorian, and so he was involved in this charity called Head Knowles, and so I decided to give all the proceeds from the pre-orders of my EP to Head Knowles, which is an organization down there that is supplying volunteers and aid and support and supplies to all the people that have just lost everything in Hurricane Dorian. So
that's awesome.
I know that they're doing great work down there, and you have a week to pre-order. So if you want to pre-order, all your money will go to a really good cause.
That's so cool. I love that. Let's get to some of your fan questions. This one comes from Twitter @AndrewJ30. How many songs or lyrics do you write that end up getting tossed or pushed aside?
As I continue to write, I'm more picky about what I write. So I would say I write less because I'm more... I know more if an idea is really good and I really want to sink my teeth into it. But I would say I'm always writing like a chorus or a verse or an idea or a melody or a guitar riff or whatever. So I have hundreds of those. Yeah.
One of my favorite things about country songwriting is how they talk about things that have been talked about, you know, ad nauseum in music, but in a way that it's never been talked about. You know, in a phrasing that
that's a big thing in country, is like trying to find the hook, the turn of phrase, like the play on words that hasn't been done.
Yeah.
Because so many of them have been done, and also if you find one, it can be like a stretch. You know what I mean? It could be like a little cheesy. So finding a really good one is actually Tough Guys is a pretty good example of that. Not to like toot my own horn as a songwriter, but like I remember when I wrote Tough Guys and then like tough, comma guys, like that's an example. That's a very country kind of lyrical tool that we use of like taking a phrase or a word that everybody knows and twisting it.
Yeah, I love it. Let's get to some in-studio questions. The first is going to come from over here.
Hello.
Hi.
So I was wondering, what is the best environment for you whenever you write or make music?
That's a great question. It really is more about your state of mind, like what place you're in mentally and emotionally, than physically where you are. Because if you have a really, really good idea, or like you just get hit with that lightning bolt of inspiration, you could be literally anywhere and it kind of doesn't matter. Like you'll just run and go. So as a songwriter, you're waiting for those moments. Like you're really just trying to set yourself up for those moments, and you can't always control when they happen. Like I know that if I go on stage, I'm going to give my best performance, but then sometimes you just have this extra thing that you can't explain or control, and songwriting is kind of like that too. Like you can hone the craft, and you can know all the techniques, and you can even feel some inspiration, but then sometimes there's like a whole nother magic in the air. And I mean, I definitely try to optimize my chances of experiencing that by doing things like meditating and spending a lot of time outdoors in nature when I can, and taking time away from my phone just to be quiet, because you can't always receive ideas if your mind is constantly full of distractions or information or pictures or whatever. But it's really more about the magic and less about the location. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a great question. Final question will come from Rex. You're right behind me.
Hi.
I wanted to ask if you could collaborate with someone living or dead, who would it be?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I would love to collaborate with Zed because I just think he's such a genius. And a lot of the modern EDM producers kind of remind me of like classical composers, like Mozart and Beethoven and all that stuff. The way that they like arrange all of the instruments and all the parts are so specific, kind of like a symphony. So I think it's really interesting how music is kind of changing form, not only like in the landscape of production, like in the footprint of a mix of how all the things are laid out, but also just in terms of form. Like even in the last few years, we've seen song form completely change in pop music to have like a complete instrumental break and drop. And like that's a new thing that everyone's just accepted as like, oh, that's a new hook, but it has no vocals. Except like chopped up like yeah. But it's so interesting, right?
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff fascinates me, and I love people who are on the cutting edge of that kind of composition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. Right on. I always look to like, you ever listen to that Jack U album from like a few years ago?
Yes.
I always looked at that album as a real turning point in terms of
Yeah.
like, pop production, at least this decade.
You're right, especially that form that we're
Yeah.
talking about, because then they
Yeah.
did the Justin Bieber song, and that was like one of the first songs that charted with that form.
Yeah, I mean, everyone
Yeah.
thought it was like a dolphin crying.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
just,
yeah.
It was like, it's almost like, because it's like what it is. It's
The
almost
where
like
where you
destroying.
where are you now?
Yeah.
That-
Yeah. And it's like just destroying the vocal and
Yeah.
distorting it beyond belief and then resampling.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, some musicians might look down on that, but I mean, in 20 years, like these are new instruments.
Yeah,
like that's
no,
what they are.
totally.
It's like it's Yeah, it's produced by technology, and you can look at that. Purists will look at that however they want, but it's an instrument that people are expressing and creating through.
Yeah, absolutely. Music at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Speaking of music, we got the EP again, Chasin Me, coming out next Friday, October 18th. Is that the date? It's on the
Yes,
18th?
yes.
Wow, the year's flying by.
I know.
All right, guys, one more time for Caroline Jones.
Thank you so much,
Caroline.
Kevin.
This is great.